They fired me thinking I'd disappear, but I had receipts and free time. My name is Marissa, and the first thing you need to know is this. I never wanted to be a whistleblower. I wasn't looking for a fight. I was a quiet kind of ambitious, the type that says thank you too often and triple checks every spreadsheet. I didn't chase power. I just wanted to do good work, be respected, and eventually afford a home where the windows opened all the way. At 31, I was a financial analyst at a mid-sized private equity firm called Branwell Partners, not the kind of place that makes headlines, but the kind that owns all the buildings in the headlines: commercial real estate, infrastructure, energy. We had our hands in a little bit of everything, and our partners liked it that way. I had been there 4 years, moved up quietly, never asked for much. People called me steady. They meant it as a compliment, and for a while it was, until I found something I wasn't supposed to see. It started with an email, not even a dramatic one, just a line item in an internal invoice marked consulting retainer, discretionary, core, $187,000 charged to an offshore entity I'd never seen before. Now, here's the thing. I wasn't the kind of analyst who questioned senior leadership. You don't last in private equity by being curious. You last by being accurate. But something about that number bothered me. Too big. Too vague. Too intentional. So I checked the past quarters, found another, and another, all billed to the same LLC, all signed off by the same partner, Greg Whitfield. Greg was a golden boy, mid-40s, charming, played golf with the governor. People said he'd be managing partner within 2 years, and suddenly, I was holding proof that he'd been funneling nearly $1 million through a dummy account. At first I thought, maybe it's a slush fund, maybe it's internal politics, maybe it's sanctioned. So I asked, quietly. I brought it up to our compliance officer. Nothing accusatory, just, hey, can I get clarity on these retainer payments? They're not tagged under any standard vendor. She looked at the screen. Her eyes narrowed. Then she said, I'll get back to you. She never did. But the next day, I got pulled into a meeting with HR and Greg, and they told me, very calmly, that due to organizational restructuring, my role had been eliminated, just like that. 4 years of spotless work. Gone. No warning. No severance. Just a forced signature on an NDA and a cardboard box. I walked out of that building with a box of desk clutter and a USB drive. I didn't think twice about sticking in my purse 2 nights earlier. It wasn't stolen. It was insurance. See, the week before my termination, I'd been working late, too late, and I stumbled on something odd in our audit prep folder. It wasn't just the invoices. It was emails. Chains between Greg and a private consulting firm with no website, no address, and a client list that looked like a fiction writer's fever dream. One thread stood out. Subject line, Q4 funds, clean transfer confirmation. Inside, make sure the Cayman line is scrubbed from the report. Optics are sensitive this quarter. That wasn't ambiguity, that was strategy. And I didn't need a PhD to know this went beyond ethics violations. It was laundering, with shareholder funds, across jurisdictions. And they fired me not because I was wrong, but because I was right. I went home numb, ordered Thai food I didn't eat. Sat on the floor next to my half-unpacked box, staring at a post-it that read, "Be thorough, not loud." It had been my motto. Now it felt like a curse. That night, I opened the files again, not out of vengeance, out of necessity. Because if I didn't do something with what I knew, they would spin it. They would make me the unstable one, the disgruntled employee, the bitter ex-staffer with a vendetta. So I created a folder, named it something harmless, Conference Notes, NOV. Inside, I placed flagged invoices, offshore transfers, 11 internal emails, signed memos from Greg to compliance, 1 inter-office memo, instructing junior staff to bypass formal reporting chains for efficiency. It was enough. Maybe not to convict, but to raise hell. The next day, I reached out to an old college friend, Ava Nguyen. She was now a journalist. Not just any journalist, the kind who'd done a Pulitzer shortlisted piece on municipal corruption 2 years earlier. We hadn't talked in ages. But I sent one line. "You ever chase white-collar crime?" "I've got a story with teeth," she replied in 6 minutes. "When and where?" We met at a neutral cafe, the kind with too much wood paneling and employees that don't blink when you stay 5 hours over one coffee. Ava showed up with a backpack, no makeup, and eyes that scanned like airport security. She hugged me like no time had passed, but once we sat down, she was all business. Start from the beginning. Don't dramatize, just facts. I opened my laptop, walked her through the invoices, the emails, the dummy vendor. Her brows furrowed. She jotted notes like shorthand was a reflex. Then she asked the question that confirmed I was right to call her. "What's the connection between Branwell and Corsair Holdings?" I blinked. "What?" "The Shell account you flagged. It links back to Corsair Holdings. That's not just a fake vendor. That's a known laundering node. They came up in a 2019 international finance probe, but slipped through because of insufficient evidence." I stared at her, stunned. I thought I was just dealing with one dirty partner. She shook her head. "This is systemic, Marissa. Greg Whitfield might be the one you caught, but he's not the only one feeding the machine. We worked all afternoon, cross-referenced offshore filings, tracked partner emails against quarterly earnings calls, mapped donor connections to real estate acquisitions. It was dizzying. The further we dug, the more names popped up. Not just Greg, not just Branwell, but 6 other firms. 3 political action committees, and 1 charity that hadn't filed a clean audit in 5 years. Ava leaned back at one point and whispered, "This isn't just fraud. This is organized economic deception on a multi-sector level." I felt like vomiting because I had thought I was just a cog in a broken wheel. Turns out, I had been sitting in the engine room of a ghost ship designed to plunder money and blame it on waves. We knew we had enough for a story, but not enough for protection. "We need to go slow," Ava said. "If we rush this, they'll bury us in lawsuits and counter-accusations. We'll get labeled conspiracy theorists." So we built a plan. Verify all financial connections. Map out the key players. Interview former staffers who'd left quietly. Leak snippets anonymously to test reactions. Prepare a full dossier for one trusted editor. We shook on it like we were planning a heist, except we weren't stealing. We were returning the truth to the people who deserved it. That night, Ava texted me, "You sure about this?" And I replied, "They fired me to shut me up. I've never been louder." We agreed to release a teaser. Just 1 document, 1 invoice, no commentary. No names. Posted anonymously through a secure submission to a subreddit known for exposing corporate malfeasance. We uploaded it on a Tuesday night. By Wednesday morning, it had 20,000 upvotes. By noon, Financial Twitter had picked it up. By evening, someone had traced the LLC listed to a fund previously flagged in an international watchdog report. We didn't say anything, but inside a private thread between Ava, myself, and her editor, we knew we had stirred the pot. They're watching.
"Now," Ava texted. "Good," I replied. "Let them sweat."
But the tension didn't take long to rise. On Thursday, I received an envelope in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Typed, all caps. "You don't know what you're messing with. Walk away." No name, no logo, just the threat, and the chill that ran down my back like a wire. I showed it to Ava. She didn't flinch. "They're trying to scare you early. Standard play. It means we hit a nerve." But I wasn't as calm. Because this wasn't just about losing a job anymore. It wasn't even about Greg. It was about power. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that whispers in bank statements and erases people with polite HR emails. Still, we pressed on. Ava spoke to a former intern at Branwell who had been terminated after reporting an irregular payroll cycle. He had screenshots. Another ex-employee admitted she left after being discouraged from reporting a partner's extravagant reimbursements. There was a pattern, and Ava was stitching it together like a courtroom quilt. By the second week, we had names, timelines, financial trails, patterns of retaliation, leaked emails from 3 separate whistleblowers, and then something unexpected happened. A junior associate from Greg Whitfield's team reached out. Encrypted message. No greeting. Just, I have something. I'm scared, but I'll talk. On my terms. Ava looked at me across the table and said, "We're not just exposing them anymore. They're starting to defect." His name was Nathan, junior associate, mid-20s. The kind of guy who wore suits that didn't quite fit and never made eye contact in meetings. He met Ava and me in a crowded brunch spot downtown. Neutral territory. No quiet corners. No recording. Devices in the open. He looked exhausted. Eyes red. Hands fidgeting. "I shouldn't be doing this," he said. "Then why are you?" Ava asked calmly. He paused, then pulled a flash drive from his coat pocket. "Because I used to believe in them, and now I don't sleep." The drive had emails. Real ones. Direct messages from Greg to 3 different partners, openly discussing routing bonuses through indirect vendors to avoid tax triggers, code names, payment structures, even dates. It also had something else. A full organizational chart, with red flags next to names involved in sensitive logistics. Greg calls them the Clean Hands Club, Nathan explained. They don't handle the money, just approve things they never look at too closely. We stared at the screen in silence. This was the map we needed. It proved the fraud wasn't a mistake. It was architected, with plausible deniability baked in. "Why come forward now?" I asked. He looked at me. "Because I saw what they did to you, and I realized, if they'd do that to someone like you, I'm expendable too." He left right after. Didn't want to be seen. Didn't want thanks. Just wanted out. Ava and I worked for hours that night. We now had financial proof, internal dialogue, chain of approvals, multiple corroborating voices. It was enough. Ava's editor gave the green light. Full story, front page, Sunday. We spent the next 2 days preparing, redacting names to protect identities, double confirming every financial record, vetting every quote, preparing legal buffers in case of retaliation. And then, Sunday morning came. Headline in bold black serif. Across the site's homepage, "The Empire of Ash, How Branwell Partners Hid Millions, Silenced Whistleblowers, and Bought Their Way Out of Scrutiny." By noon, it was trending. By nightfall, 2 other firms mentioned in the article had released statements of concern. And at 11:42 p.m., Greg Whitfield deactivated all his social media accounts. The article exploded. 4 million reads in the first 48 hours. It made the rounds on LinkedIn, on financial Reddit, on podcasts hosted by ex-CEOs who called it the reckoning no one saw coming. Some called me brave. Some called me stupid. But no one called me wrong. The documents were airtight. Greg Whitfield became untraceable overnight. No press appearances, no statements, no lawyer visible. He disappeared, which, in that world, is the closest thing to a confession. By Tuesday, Branwell Partners issued a statement. "We take these allegations seriously. An internal investigation has been launched. Classic PR move. Translated, we're stalling." But the blowback didn't stop. By Friday, the SEC announced a preliminary inquiry. A class action lawsuit had been filed by minority shareholders. City Comptroller publicly questioned the firm's role in a housing contract scandal, and 3 partners stepped away for personal reasons. My inbox was chaos. Journalists, former employees, victims, haters, opportunists. Some offered me book deals, others threatened lawsuits, and a few, the ones that really stayed with me, just said, "Thank you." I thought I was crazy. But despite the storm outside, I was alone. Ava was still in the fight, busy fielding media calls, protecting sources, and dodging corporate intimidation. But I was just home. No job, no income, no routine. I spent years being the quiet one behind the spreadsheet. Now I was the woman whose name people whispered in boardrooms. And while that should have felt empowering, it felt like standing naked in a courtroom where everyone's wearing suits. Even my mom called and asked, "Are you safe?" I didn't know how to answer, because safety wasn't the issue. It was identity. Who was I now? Not an analyst, not just a whistleblower, not a victim, just a woman who told the truth and lost everything but her spine. And yet, I would do it again. Because there's a moment, a single, quiet moment, when you realize you didn't just break a system, you proved it was broken in the first place. 3 weeks after the article dropped, I received an email. No subject line, just 2 sentences. "You don't know me, but I know what you did, and I've got something you need to see." Attached was a PDF. It looked like a scanned ledger, names, amounts, offshore accounts, and, in the margins, handwritten notes. Approved by GPW, clean path confirmed. Shell NUR 3 rerouted through Cousins Fund. No audit on this. Delete from internal record. I read it twice. Then I sent it to Ava. She called me instantly. This isn't just more evidence. This is confirmation that other firms knew and helped cover it. Within a week, 4 more anonymous whistleblowers came forward. One from a private energy fund, another from a tech investment group, 2 from rival PE firms who had partnered with Branwell on massive urban development deals. They all had different documents, different angles, but the same theme: complicity. The system wasn't just broken. It was designed to silence, sanitize, and survive scrutiny. One woman, a mid-level accountant at a firm I'd never even heard of, sent me a voice memo. She whispered the whole time. "I've kept my head down for 12 years. I have 3 kids. I didn't want to lose my job. But after I read your story, I realized I was already losing myself." She ended it with, "I don't want credit. I just want out." And that's when I understood something that no article, no headline, no retweet could really capture. This wasn't about exposing a scandal anymore. It was about cracking the silence that let these men operate for decades. Because every broken contract, every inflated bonus, every off-the-books payment was made possible by a room full of people who looked away. And now, they were looking straight at me, some with fear, some with admiration, some with a kind of grief that only comes when you realize you were part of the problem. I didn't respond to every message, but I read them all, and every one of them, every file, every confession, every scanned memo, became another stone in the avalanche. Ava was building something now, a full investigative series. This wasn't a one-off story anymore. It was a movement. And me? I was still just a woman with a laptop. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't standing alone anymore. It was a Tuesday. Quiet. Overcast. I had no interviews lined up, no press follow-ups, no more anonymous files to sift through. It felt strange, the stillness. After weeks of noise, tension, and relentless movement, there was just quiet. And I realized something unsettling. I didn't know what to do with peace anymore. I had become so familiar with fighting that calm felt like guilt. I stood in my tiny kitchen, staring at the electric kettle, thinking about how easily I could have stayed the version of me from a year ago. The one who double-checked receipts. The one who swallowed questions. The one who smiled politely in rooms full of men who pretended not to see her. That Marissa, she would have rationalized it all, called it company politics, said, "It's above my pay grade," told herself, "As long as I'm not directly involved, it's not my problem." That version of me didn't want to cause trouble. She wanted to be liked, to be safe, to be small enough not to be a target. I sat on the couch, opened my email, and found a message from an old coworker, David, from the finance team. We'd never been close, but the subject line said, "I owe you an apology." Inside, "You were right. About everything. I saw things. I said nothing. I watched them fire you and told myself it wasn't my place. You stood up, and I stayed quiet. I'm sorry." I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. Just sat there, letting the words echo. Not in anger, but in recognition. Because I understood that version of him too. The one who thought silence bought survival. But now I knew better. Silence buys compliance. And eventually, complicity. I replied simply. "I appreciate your honesty. Let's do better going forward. Together." Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a fresh Word doc. No headlines, no leaks, no villains. Just a title. Lessons. From the fire, notes on leaving quiet systems loudly, and I started writing. Not to expose, not to punish, but to process. To make sure the next time I was handed a mask, I wouldn't wear it just to keep others comfortable. Because the truth is, I didn't just walk away from a job. I walked away from every version of myself that thought being good meant being quiet. And I was never going back. They say everyone gets 15 minutes of fame. But what they don't tell you is, if your name gets tied to something explosive, fraud, scandal, whistleblowing, your 15 minutes can stretch into months of speculation, judgment, and being reduced to a symbol. I didn't want to be a symbol. I wanted to be understood. Not as some savior. Not as the girl who took down Branwell. But as a woman who got tired of apologizing for doing the right thing. So I started speaking. On my own terms. I declined every TV spot. Turned down the podcast tours. But I said yes to a small university ethics seminar, a women in finance panel, that met in the basement of a community center, a Zoom workshop for interns in their first corporate jobs. No cameras, no PR. Just people. Real ones. Asking real questions. And when I told them what happened, I didn't dramatize it. I said, "I noticed a line item. I asked a question. They erased me." Then I paused. Let the room sit with that. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do in a broken system is just not disappear quietly. My sessions became a kind of therapy. Not just for me, but for the students, the entry-level workers, the overworked accountants who came up afterward and said, "I've seen stuff. I thought I was crazy." Or, "They told me I was too sensitive." Or, "Thank you. I didn't know we were allowed to say something." And that's when I understood. What happened to me wasn't just a story. It was a pattern. And the only way to break a pattern is to document it. So I kept writing. Not exposés, not legal memos, but journals. Every meeting that felt off. Every red flag I once ignored. Every micro-silencing moment. That taught me to stay small. I turned it into a manuscript, a memoir. Not about a scandal, but about the slow-burning courage it takes to choose integrity over belonging. Ava wrote the foreword. Her last line read, "Marissa didn't burn a bridge." She revealed it was never meant to carry her in the first place. And when I read it, I knew. This wasn't vengeance. It was testimony. I was invited to speak at a quiet conference in Vermont. Nothing flashy. Just a room of young professionals in folding chairs and mismatched blazers, scribbling in free notebooks while sipping lukewarm coffee. I told my story again. The emails, the invoices, the silence that nearly swallowed me whole. And when I was done, someone asked from the back, "What would you say to the version of yourself before you blew the whistle?" I paused. Because that version of me, quiet, precise, obedient, still, lived somewhere deep in my bones. She still flinched at confrontation, still worried about being too much, still believed that loyalty meant silence. So I looked out at them, at the nervous interns and jaded managers and hopeful career switchers, and said, I'd tell her she's not crazy, that asking questions isn't insubordination, that discomfort is sometimes the receipt of integrity. Then I smiled, and I'd tell her that one day, she'll sleep without clenching her jaw. The room went quiet, not out of awe, out of recognition. Afterward, a young woman approached me. Couldn't have been more than 22. She didn't say much, just pressed a folded note into my hand and whispered, "You reminded me of my mom. She never said anything, but I will." She walked away before I could reply. I opened the note later. It just said, "You made me brave." I cried then. Not loud, not messy. Just, finally. Because for all the noise, the fear, the headlines, and the threats, that was the first moment I felt like all of it meant something. Greg Whitfield never faced trial. The firm paid a fine, restructured, changed logos, pretended to start over. But people remembered, because truth sticks. Even when systems repaint the walls. As for me, I live in a small apartment now. Quiet neighborhood. Sunlight on the kitchen tiles. I make tea. I write. I sleep. And I wake up knowing that every day I open my eyes, I don't owe silence to anyone. Not out of fear. Not out of guilt. Not even out of love. And if they ask me what I do now, I tell them. I build bridges from broken systems. I just make sure they're wide enough to walk away from.